Hi there. Welcome to Talking Tankless, the official podcast of Noritz tankless water heaters. My name is Andrew, and I'm part of the marketing team. And I've got alongside me two co-hosts, Will and Eric, who are part of the product training team. This is our first podcast, so the format isn't really set in stone, but we really think this is a cool way to learn about Noritz and tankless in a casual, conversational fashion, aside from just like another PowerPoint or Zoom webinar. In the future, we plan on bringing in other departments and even taking your questions to give you a little more insight into the company that you've really never had before. Now that we've got the introduction out of the way, our topic for today is the latest in Noritz offering. It's called the NRCR, and specifically some of the little known features of the NRCR. But first, can I have one of you explain what the NRCR is and how it's different from our other Noritz products?
Go ahead, Eric. I'll jump in and add my own take on this amazing product that we released pretty much exactly a year ago, and I think. But go ahead, take it away, Eric.
Like the full history on this product?
Well, you can just
what we tried before in the past and not...
Just give people kind of an introduction on what the NRCR is and like why it's different.
So the NRCR is our latest and greatest unit that we've manufactured. Really keeps us on par with the rest of the industry that has a unit with a pump in it. A lot of Japanese companies are known for being very conservative, and that's probably why our unit designed in-house took as long as it did. But this unit, because it took as long as it did, we really mapped out some of the sticking points from other manufacturers' designs and even the designs that we've experimented with in the past. So we feel that we have a comparable unit that would meet the demands of the market. And so this unit does have a recirculation pump internal to the unit. Provides instant hot water to your fixtures on demand. And it can actually work with an existing return line plumbing or without. And if you don't have it, you can purchase an aftermarket accessory. It's called our crossover valve assembly. Install at the furthest water fixture, and you can get hot water to all the fixtures serviced on that same branch line to that furthest fixture.
So I guess that brings us to our first topic then. You kind of touched on that, is the fact that although it's a recirculation product, typically you would need a recirc line in your house that's already, already installed, right? But if you don't have one, we do that solution. We have a crossover kit, right?
Exactly. So ideally, if you have a experienced recirculation system, basically never having to wait for hot water, well, your existing plumbing already has the hardware, essentially the return line plumbing back to the tank or to the hot water source, in our case, a tankless water heater. That isn't very common in the industry. So we're trying to reach out to a market where hot water on demand is a necessity. And that's what we've imagined, or that's what we've seen in the market, and are being able to meet that need. And so especially for Southern California, a lot of the building code here does not want to install a recirculation pump because it basically uses more water and uses more energy. And we're trying to be a more green and efficient product, but at the same time meet the needs of what the market requires. And a lot of that is, I don't want to wait for hot water. And so we have some compatibility with that in the past, and decided to really focus on designing a product with that pump internal.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about recirculation, especially here in California, where water, we have drought conditions almost every other year. And so when you don't have a recirculation, you open up your hot water faucet and you got to purge that cold water that's in the lines. If you have a small home, it's not too much. But if you have a large, 2,000 to 3,000 square foot home, like a lot of people do here in California, that's potentially, a gallon or two or three of cold water they've got to purge before getting hot water from their source, whether it's a tankless or a tank. So the recirculation is great to keep your plumbing hot when you need it. And basically helps to reduce water waste, which is very important here in California. Other states that are a little more fortunate that have a lot more water, it's more of just a convenience factor. But here for California, it's great for saving this precious resource that we don't get a lot of all the time.
Real quick, just to expand on that crossover kit that you said, Eric, you could install. What does a plumber need to know about that kit exactly?
So the crossover valve kit is an aftermarket accessory. It's actually the ground faucet comfort valve, but not including the pump, because the pump we have is internal to the unit. So you would install this crossover tee at the furthest water fixture, and it would basically cycle the water to that location. At that crossover valve, there is a wax element that's temperature sensitive. And so when the heater is directing hot water to that location, it's basically moving all the cold water in that hot water line out and pushing it basically into your cold water side. So you never lose that water down the drain. It's simply being moved over to the cold water side. Now the concern there is that, well, you're pressurizing the cold water side. But that's not exactly the case, because we're actually replacing one for one all the water that's being moved out of the cold water line back into the hot water side.
So another thing I want to bring up is they may need to plumb it a little different underneath the unit. Is that right?
Yes. You will need some space underneath the unit to adapt this crossover tee. But essentially all we're doing is adapting this tee underneath the sink and redirecting some of the control lines to this new apparatus.
Yeah, when you use the crossover, because the NRCR has its own connection for the recirculation line for when you do have that dedicated line. But when you're using the crossover and you do not have that, there is a flow sensor on that recirculation connection that the heater does need to see flow across that flow sensor. And you would use, we call it a branch pipe. But basically, you're only going to have cold going into the heater and hot water going out. The branch pipe splits that cold water coming in and tees off and provides a way for water to enter the unit through that recirculation connection, hit that flow sensor, go through the pump. So the heater is happy because it sees flow on both flow sensors. The pump is on that side of the waterways, so it can actually move the water. So that's why when you do the crossover connection, you do need to have that branch pipe to make sure that you can actually move water through the recirculation system.
And there's like a certain setting they're supposed to flip, right, on the unit after.
Yeah, inside the unit there is a connection that says crossover. I believe it's a pink wire. You clip it in together while the heater is unplugged from power. That will tell the heater that you're planning to use it with that crossover valve.
Okay, great. That kind of brings me to my next topic about the pump and sort of smart features that come with the NRCR. Could someone kind of touch on maybe or is there programming needed to learn functionality for like when the pump turns on?
The NRCR out of the box, it is set up for auto learning mode. So once it's all installed, plumbed, gas, vented, everything, and you're ready to use it, it is going to remember hot water usages from the homeowner. So anytime that they open a hot water faucet for 3 seconds or longer, the heater is going to remember that as a use, tag it, and then the next day it will run the recirculation pump during that time. And it's a continually learning, continually evolving schedule where if that time block, there's no hot water use for 3 days, then the heater is going to drop that off its memory and not run the pump because it realizes that you're not using hot water during that time anymore. So I don't need to waste energy and run the recirculation system. So that's the most likely and probably the suggested use is that auto learning mode, because it's just going to revolve around the homeowner's schedule. But some people really like to take control over stuff like that and set stuff manually. And so they have that option by using either the optional RC9018M commercial remote or the Wi-Fi adapter. They can just set the schedule. If they have a really firm schedule and they don't really stray from that too much, then they can just set that manually, maybe from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. in the morning and 4 to 8 p.m. at night, because that's their prime hot water usages and they don't stray from that. So there's a lot of options as far as how to use the recirculation. And then, of course, they have the on-demand capability, which is abides by California Title 24 requirements, where it's on-demand. It's activated by a push button. There's wireless push button options, motion sensor options, and that way they can really minimize the extra energy usage. If they don't want to have it on a schedule, they just want to hit a button or have a motion sensor pick up when they're ready to use hot water. It'll activate the pump. It will prime the hot water side, hot water plumbing with hot water, and then they use their hot water, their shower, whatever they're going to use.
And I do want to bring up the default mode that it comes in is the auto learn, right?
Correct. Yeah. Out of the box, you don't have to do any setting at all. Just once it's all plumbed, gas line, venting, power, ready to go, then you just plug it in and it learns.
Yeah, and so what Will did highlight were some of the aftermarket customizations with the commercial model remote or even the on-demand switch, but there's even included customizations just off of the auto learning mode as well. So there's an option for initially 3-day learning by default, but what if you want to include the entire week, including the weekend, because your weekend schedule might be a little bit different than your weekday schedule? Well, that's a customization that you can do on the unit. That procedure probably less than 5 minutes, and we have videos for that on our YouTube channel, Noritz America, that can really outline that. So you can have the learning hot water usage flags over 7 days versus 3. Instead of a 3-second learning flag, you can actually draw that out to a 10-second flag or a 60-second flag. So if you only really want to store the most meaningful hot water usages, like taking a shower, washing your dishes, or washing your clothes in the washing machine, then you can actually customize the settings for the recirculation to only register those longer, more meaningful demands. Because if you're living a larger family and you have teenagers coming in at 3, 4 a.m. in the morning and they're going to turn on hot water, you're going to register those odd demands throughout the day. And if you don't want those things, then you can actually customize it to only count the more meaningful hot water demands.
Yeah, it's good that you brought that up, because out of the box, it is kind of set more towards, say, customers' comfort and convenience, where it's going to, with that 3-second learning flag, it's going to catch almost any hot water use. Even if you open up the fixture for a few seconds to wash your hands, it's going to count that as a hot water use and remember it. So some people might find that a little too sensitive. Like you said, they only want it to remember showers or dishes or things like that, to really minimize the amount of runtime on the unit to conserve energy and things like that. So that's good that you brought up those customization and how you can really fine tune that auto learning feature to what works best for you or your family or your residents.
I think this is a good time for us to plug Noritz.com/tech tips. If you are unfamiliar with some of these settings with NRCR, you want a video walkthrough, we've got them on Noritz.com/tech tips. Or if you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, that's youtube.com/Noritz America. So that kind of brings me to the next topic. What else do you got for us, Eric, on the NRCR? One of the kind of exciting features that I've heard actually from our sales team is the steady BTU mode. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so for this NRCR product, we do realize it's going to be recirculating hot water back to the unit. And slowly over time, that temperature rise is going to decrease to the point where potentially the heater's set to 120 degrees, and because of no hot water usage, you're returning water back at 120 degrees. So there's some safety measures on the NRCR to prevent additional hot water temperature when it doesn't need to be made, and to prevent any type of scalding to the end user.
Yeah, the steady BTU is actually a great feature for installations in warmer climates where during the summertime, during the peak, you're having triple digit temperatures outside, and your cold water isn't really even cold anymore. Strangely enough, or believe it or not, even here in LA, when we have our hottest days in the summer, our cold water at certain parts of Southern California is easily over 90 degrees. And it's like, that's very lukewarm water at that point. And so how that affects a lot of tankless is all tankless have a minimum BTU that they're capable of firing at. And there's a whole BTU calculation, BTU formula that you can calculate to see the actual BTU demand. But oftentimes with low flow, especially here in Southern California where we're trying to conserve water, a lot of our fixtures are low flow, 1 gallon per minute or less, somewhere right around there. So if you have a low flow situation and a high incoming water temperature, oftentimes that needs far less BTU than the minimum capability of that tankless heater. And so with the steady BTU feature, it uses very precise burner and water flow servo modulation to kick that burner on and off precisely when needed to make sure that the heater can work in those less than ideal situations of high incoming temperature, low flow rate, and still provide the customer with a stable temperature output, usually within plus or minus 2, maybe 3 degrees of their set temperature. And so it's something that I was really impressed when I got to see it in action when a year ago when we had the unit released and we had it set up here. It's going to be a game changer for those warmer climates where they consistently get 85, 90, even 95 degree cold water in the summer times. And even some of our own tankless heaters in the past kind of struggled in that situation, but the NRCR is going to handle that like it's not even a problem.
That's great. I know a lot of our sales teams are especially excited about that feature.
Yeah, it's something that, like I said, not only us, but other manufacturers have had to deal with that situation, especially in the southern part of the United States, Texas, places like that, where they always see triple digits in the summertime and their cold water isn't really cold in the summertime.
All right. So kind of what brought about this topic and the idea for this specific podcast episode were the little kind of features that in marketing, as we make brochures, it's stuff that doesn't make it onto the brochures, onto the trifolds. It's not something that sales or customer care are really going to be bringing up to the customer, but I really think are interesting kind of quality of life details that I'm kind of proud of, because it shows that our R&D, our engineering team, they're actually paying attention to the little details and they're taking the time to do that. So some of those things are, for example, the descale service reminder function. Can one of you guys touch on that?
Yeah, it's basically essentially be more proactive. So we've increased our warranties on our products, and they're some of the highest in the industry. And a way to police that is with our descale procedure and service reminder functions. So if the installing contractor isn't, or even the end user, doesn't have any type of preventive maintenance schedule for the heater, and that preventive maintenance schedule is essentially to protect the heater from the poor water quality that we have here in North America. It's really bad. Like where our offices are close to Disneyland, it's upwards of 40 grains. And if you look at any of our tables and our manuals, they all stop at like 18. So we're extremely hard water quality in this area. So we're very familiar and adamant about expressing the need that these units need to be serviced. Ultimately, if you test and treat the water quality, soften it with a salt-based system, and you maintain that, you'll never have to really service these heaters on the water quality side. But if you don't, because you maybe don't like the way soft water feels, then we've taken it upon ourselves to remind the end user or the servicer when the heater needs to be descaled. So we can take full control of that ownership of letting the end user and the contractor know when to service the heaters.
So to just give people kind of a baseline, we've had a quote unquote service reminder feature in the past, but could you kind of outline what it was before versus how it works now to kind of give people a good idea?
So we started introducing the service reminder function, I think, in like 2012 units. And for these newer units, they have been slightly enhanced. So previously, it was just a total combustion hours that have accumulated on the heater, regardless of temperature or duration of usage, like average duration of your hot water usage. And that can definitely change depending on if it's a commercial application or residential one. And so in consideration of that, with these newer models, they also consider the temperature setting, the duration of usage, as well as the total combustion hours. And depending on that average usage at that temperature, because we know that scale increases exponentially the higher that the heater is set to on the temperature. So a lot of commercial applications, you would generally see recommendations for servicing the heater if it's not the water quality is not being treated, is generally at least once a year, as opposed to maybe residential municipalities, service like LA Water District. Then those residential applications, because they're done at lower temperatures, typically we're setting the heater at 120. That could take over 2 years even to require that service because of the general on-demand usage for residential applications versus like full working, maybe even 12-hour days in a restaurant that heater is going to be demanded to make hot water.
Yeah, I think water quality and maintaining your hot water appliance, and this applies, believe it or not, a lot of people don't know that tanks, even your coffee makers that heats anything that heats water has some form of maintenance that it needs because hard water takes a toll on it. And so, over the years, we, like Eric mentioned, we introduced a service reminder feature back around 2012 to kind of put that out in the forefront because a lot of people just were not aware that they have to do any kind of maintenance on their tankless or do anything to give it that long life that we expect out of it. And so we started off as kind of more of a one-size-fits-all, just kind of, it would remind you based on a number of months or a year or something like that. But this new service reminder in the NRCR is a lot more, I like to call it intelligent. As Eric said, it keeps track of a number of things, a number of conditions as far as temperature, average BTUs, combustion hours, and it looks at all of that information that it's presented to intelligently remind the user when a service should be done. And so that's kind of the next evolution of our service reminder feature that I think is going to go a long way with reminding people to take care of this investment. Like this tankless, I think is a kind of a long-term investment for the comfort and convenience of the homeowner, especially with the recirculation. It's going to be running a little more frequently than just a normal tankless. And so if you maintain that thing, then it's going to easily last beyond the warranty period.
Okay, thank you. And now back to sort of one of the other smaller details that I've heard actually plumbers really like is the new bracket. And that's not something that, it's
not something that a homeowner really cares about, but you're right. For the installer that's got to, hang these, 75, 80 pound giant suitcases on the wall and try to line up things. The bracket, we introduced version 1 of that bracket, if you will, with our Easy series where you put the bracket on the wall and then you hang the heater on that bracket. And once again, another evolution of this product, the NRCR, we've taken that, I think, to the next level by not only you put the bracket on the wall like you're used to, but now you can adjust the unit side to side, I think around about an inch in either direction to make sure that you get that perfect alignment with the venting coming in from the wall or from the ceiling, and it gives you a little bit of that fudge factor where if you thought you had everything lined up, but you find out you're off by half an inch, no big deal. Just slide the unit over one way or the other, get everything lined up, and you're good to go.
Great. And kind of going back again to the installer or servicer, there's another little feature for the circuit board, it's now kind of got a hinge where it can just swivel out if you need to get back to the components in the back of the heater instead of it just hanging there loosely by all the wires. Just kind of another thing that touches on just the kind of details that Noritz Japan is kind of really paying attention to.
Yeah, I like to think of it like, obviously the heater, we're trying to integrate features and things that provide comfort and convenience to the person who actually uses it and puts it in their home. But we can't completely ignore the fact that people are installing it. People are going to be servicing it in the future, and they need to have a bit of ease of access, or they need to have an easier time installing and maintaining this product in the future. So you're absolutely right that, everything we've learned over the past, 2 decades or so here, that we're trying to integrate things into the units that not only make it better for the customer, but better for the professional that's installing or servicing these.
Okay. So we actually had a list of 10 things. Today we only went over, I think, 4 or 5. But if you want to actually read up on all 10 that we went in depth with in this blog post, you can find it on Noritz blog, or you'll also find it in our podcast notes. So noritz.com/podcasts. We'll put the blog post in there so you can read it. I think that's about time to wrap up our first podcast. The exciting thing about this new medium is that you as a listener can give feedback and kind of really mold this show into what you want to see or hear on future episodes. I'd also like to invite you to look at our additional training offerings at training.noritz.com. And we'll be posting the video recording of this podcast on youtube.com/NoritzAmerica. While you're at it, you can follow our other socials at Noritz America. So Instagram.com/Noritz America. Same with Twitter. And if you're driving or not at your computer, we'll be posting all the links again at the show notes, Noritz.com/podcast. That wraps it up for the first episode of Talking Tankless. And follow our socials to find out when our next episode is. See you later.